So, I want to say something that will be uncomfortable for a specific type of individual, the type who is most likely to be watching this series. Willpower is the most overrated tool in the high performers kit. Not because discipline doesn't matter, it does. Not because structure isn't valuable, it is. But because willpower operates from the prefrontal cortex, from the monkeys, and the monkeys yield to the lizard every single time a genuine threat is perceived, which means the most disciplined individuals in the room, the ones who have tried the hardest, who have the most sophisticated self knowledge, are the most thoroughly stuck because they have been bringing a spreadsheet to an evolutionary emergency. So I can recall when I used to actually eat so that I could take my supplements. I had this morning protocol and I was so extraordinarily consistent, as if the thing that I was trying to regulate was getting worse. And the reality was that, you cannot out supplement a programming that is just seemingly innately part of yourself. And it took me a long time to realize that, and in particular, what really did hit home was the fact that if I missed a dose, or worst case scenario, missed 2 doses, then I really, really felt my mental health dipping down so much. So I knew the supplements were doing something, but how good is it when actually you are controlled by what pills you take? I mean, that kind of sounds like a patient who is a good patient taking exactly what the doctor prescribed. Well, you know that I prefer to be an unpatient. So, anyway, my name is Dr. Jen Draper, the former medical doctor, and this is episode 5, Willpower, the Nervous System, and the fundamental mismatch that most self development content refuses to name. So, here is actually what is happening when you apply willpower to a nervous system pattern. The lizard processes the threat at 200 milliseconds before you are consciously aware of the stimulus. So, your lizard has actually already evaluated it and produced a physiological response and prepared the body for action. So, cortisol gets released, and the prefrontal cortex actually partially goes offline. So by the time the monkeys who live in the prefrontal cortex, your monkey mind, are applying the willpower and asking you questions about what you should do next and how you're going to feel about this, your bodily nervous system has already responded. So your monkeys can't prevent the response. They try to put a lid on it and try and suppress it. And suppression, as we talked about in episode 3, is storage, not resolution, and things will just keep building up underneath that suppression. So every act of willpower that is applied to an unmetabolized nervous system response adds another layer of stored charge into the system, which is why individuals who apply the most willpower often find that their patterns are intensifying, not despite the discipline, but because of it. So it's kind of a little ironic when you think that here I am working so hard to keep myself controlled and contained, and that's actually creating a bigger box to explode when it eventually does. So this particular patient who I recall one time, wow, actually came along with a spreadsheet, which even was calculated over into like a bar graph thing. Was meticulous, completely meticulous. And I mean, kudos to her. She was mapping the pattern of her analgesic use with regards to her headaches. And that that meticulous rigor that she was applying to her analgesic use was the same type of meticulous rigor that she applied to everything else in life. And she literally had a spreadsheet. I'm not exaggerating this. She logged all of her triggers and then her analgesic use pattern. And she also was noting her sleep patterns and her stressors and all of her attempted interventions with these outcome ratings. And it had been going on for about 20 years, actually. And because she'd found me, and because at that point I was an integrative doctor who was interested in the whole of the individual, I was actually supporting her in this kind of deductive, investigative, let's be a detective and put it all together and try and work it out, because I was in exactly the same sort of pattern, thinking like a detective, thinking that, oh, yes, if we can just collect enough data, then we will find the answer. And so I asked her, she started recording this, and she'd been recording it for around about 6 months by the time that she'd brought this data to me. And I said, "What do you notice about the pattern over the last 6 months?" And she paused, and with visible frustration, she actually said, "Well, it's actually getting worse." So the tracking wasn't the problem. The tracking was just evidence of the quality of her mind. The problem was that she was applying prefrontal precision to a pattern that was located in her limbic system. So, in other words, she was asking the monkeys to solve a lizard problem. And the spreadsheet was an extraordinarily detailed documentation of a nervous system that actually required something other than documentation. And at that point in time, I did not know what it was. It took me recognizing similar patterns within myself, leaving medicine and giving myself the space to change. So, if willpower doesn't change the programming, what does? Well, the lizard responds to three things, and neither of them are logic. So, safety signals, not assurances, but physiological evidence. So, co regulation with a regulated nervous system, breathing, movement, the body receiving data from its environment that the threat has actually passed. And completion, when an emotional cycle that was interrupted is actually allowed to complete through a guided process, not through just reliving what happened, then the lizard can actually update its threat mat, and then the event gets filed as past in your hippocampus as opposed to your amygdala. And third is new relational evidence. So when the elephant experiences within a safe relational context that connection is possible without having to perform, that vulnerability does not precede abandonment, then the program will update. Now, none of this requires more willpower. It actually requires less. It requires your monkeys to step back and allow the lizard and elephant to receive what they actually need, which is, for most high performers, the hardest thing that they have ever attempted. Now, let's have a little talk about the supplement trap. Magnesium, meditation apps, cold plunge protocols, morning routines with the structural complexity of a surgical prick list. Now, I'm not dismissing any of these. Some are genuinely supportive, but here's what they cannot do. You cannot supplement your way out of a survival program. You cannot breathe your way out of a belief system that was installed at age 7. And you cannot cold plunge your way through an unprocessed attachment wound. None of those interventions reach the lizard and the elephant at the level where the program was installed. They do provide temporary regulation, which definitely has value. I am not dismissing them by any stretch of the imagination. Especially the bodily and breathing processes, they really can uncover the programming. But recalibration is what the pattern requires. So, confusing temporary regulation with recalibration is how individuals spend years feeling slightly better without actually anything changing. So I just want to acknowledge that you are not undisciplined. Far from it. You are not lacking in willpower, but you're applying a prefrontal solution to a limbic problem. And the lizard is older, faster, and considerably less impressed by your morning routine than the self development industry would like you to believe. So, in episode 6, we will be exploring the fact that every stuck pattern has a lesson inside it. And the reason it keeps repeating is not that you're broken, it's that the lesson has not yet been metabolized. I'm Dr. Jen Draper. I'll see you then.